I agree, and I would put it on.
Yeah, we're good.
Right now.
Can't hear you again, Rose.
I'll wait a little time before I respond.
Oh, I
Started on fast on it.
June 13th.
What's wrong with
The different movies and everything.
Did you have a good birthday?
It was just.
The children came over and brought dinner.
Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, great. How many are here, Jen?
18.
Packing them in, Judy.
Okay.
All the people that I ran around, when I was teaching, are coming back.
Okay, let's get started. We're running a little bit behind. Somebody needs to get up on, somebody needs to smack these children over here.
That teacher's still.
Okay, we're going to continue in the 7 last teachings of Christ while he was on the cross. Let's do a little bit of review. What did we learn so far? Now, I know y'all learned something.
Oh, yeah, we did.
I'll be with you in paradise.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Forgive them for they.
forgive them, I don't know what they did.
What about last week? What did
The
we-
women
the
had a
women
major role.
Girl power.
and very
Behold thy mother, behold thy son.
and
Oh, there's more.
we learned that the church
Oh, yes.
is supposed to take care of people, right? Okay, today is as we you're supposed to. As we have discussed before, the Gospels record 7 last, I'll call them teachings of Jesus while he was on the cross. And Luke and John each record 3 separate statements or teachings. But Matthew and Mark only record 1. However, they record the same one. And this is the only statement or teaching that is told in more than one gospel. So to me, that means it's pretty important to learn about. I'm going to read Mark's account of it. This is from the 15th chapter of Mark, starting at verse 29. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. Now, as I said, only Matthew and Mark record this statement. And that's the only statement they record, his final statements. And some people think, well, this is a bad side of Jesus, that he thinks that God's forsaken him. And if you just look at it that way, you wonder, okay, why would he feel that God had forsaken him? But if you dig a little deeper, you find that there's more to it than that, which is usually true of the Bible. Anyway, let's talk about mob mentality. This statement that Jesus made is referred to as the cry of dereliction. Okay, he's hanging on the cross. He's suffering physically. He's tortured. He's miserable, he's in pain, he's in agony. Well, that wasn't enough for the people. They wanted to degrade him. They wanted to make fun of him, mock him. You know, we've heard all of our lives, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never hurt us. Well, that's not true, is it? Words cut to the quick, don't they? You get broken bones heal. Words don't ever really heal because you always remember them, don't you? And even everybody was making fun of him, weren't they? Well, not everybody. I'm sure there were some that were nice, but everybody was insulting him and telling him, you know, if you think you're so great, you can stop this. Well, he knew he could, but he didn't.
Sounds a lot like what the devil tried to say.
Exactly.
Just go ahead and jump off the pinnacle.
Yeah, you can do it.
The angels will
Yeah.
save you.
It would be easy for us to think that all these people that were dehumanizing him were horrible people. If it were only the Roman soldiers, we'd probably say, well, you know, the Romans they were bad. They did stuff like that. Or if it were the thieves on both sides that did that, we'd say, well, you know, they were criminals. That's what you'd expect. But the people who led the charge in dehumanizing him and humiliating him were considered the most pious people on the face of the earth. Now that cuts down, doesn't it? They were the deeply committed Jews, including the religious leaders, the priests and the scribes. The scribes were the ones who wrote down the scriptures and studied the scriptures and passed them on from generation to generation. These were dedicated people, dedicated, pious people. It wasn't enough that they had conspired with the Romans to silence Jesus and see him crucified. It wasn't enough that they wanted him to die the most cruel punishment on the face of the earth. They also wanted to humiliate him and crush his spirit as he hung there. That's what they were doing with these insults. And in addition, there were the passersby that just got caught up into the emotion of the day, you know. These bystanders had come into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. The previous night, they'd eaten a roasted lamb that they offered in sacrifice to God. They told the story of how God got them out of Egypt. They had placed a cup for Elijah on the table, anticipating the coming of the Messiah, which is still done to this day. There's always a place set for Elijah. They drank from that cup, hoping and praying for the coming of the Messiah. Then they sung the Hallel song, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever." You ask, how could anybody go through this? How could anybody sing songs of praise and then the next day do what they were doing? It'd be like us coming here today, listening to a Sunday school lesson, listening to a sermon, walking out the front door and going out there and start making fun of somebody or kicking somebody or shooting somebody or, you know. Again, we think, well, those were first century Jews. They were not Christians like us. We would never do anything so hurtful. We would never treat anyone so uncharitably. We would never do evil such as that. Would we? Would we? It's been said that the trial and crucifixion of Jesus, it wasn't Jesus that was on trial, but the whole of humanity. And this scene with the passersby hurling insults points to something dreadfully wrong with us. Rather than feeling compassion, the passersby found that this moved into cruelty and hate. And this sort of holds a mirror to our own souls. The problem is within us, and it starts as young children, doesn't it? I think we can all relate to I think we can think far enough back when we were children to remember being picked on, or perhaps being part of a group of kids that picked on somebody else, or, you know, why? Why do we do this? Why do children do it? Because they want to go along with the crowd? Because they want to feel important? And as we grow older, we still do it. We were talking about sports teams, sports fans. I mean, do we not do the same thing that way? If anybody, well, Kathy was giving a prime example this morning about the basketball game. Would you like to share that, Kathy?
Well, one of my friends on Facebook yesterday posted that several people had asked her going for USC. And she said, I will give you 3 definite reasons as to why I will never pull for USC. Clemson fan, everybody in the family's gone to Clemson. Whenever I see garnet and black, it's rivalry. No, never, never, never. I will never pull for South Carolina. And so I probably shouldn't have, but I responded that I thought that was a very shallow commentary, because many South Carolinians who are Clemson fans have cheered on the team, and I thought that it was, sad that she had such a viewpoint like that. I said, all of your children who graduated, if they were in a car accident and the first responders showed up wearing black and garnet, would you tell them to wait for someone in orange? If so, your blood truly runs orange.
We see this kind of thing in rivalries with sports teams. We see it, Lord knows, we saw it during this last election.
We're still seeing.
We're still seeing it, but how is, that's not really much different from these people jumping on the bandwagon and going after it's Christ because somebody else is doing it. Do we do it because we want to fit in, because we want to look important? Why do we do it?
Everybody wants to win. Number one, everybody wants to be number one. Where's Sylvia? We all know that position is taken.
Yes.
Number two, we always want someone else to do the dirty work.
Yes. Yes.
And number three, if our life is going the way we want it, we become very complacent and happy with the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about the Roman soldiers. They were just sort of doing their job that day. They, if you study crucifixion, you know that the Roman Empire probably did 20 or 30,000 crucifixions over several hundred years. And it became standard for the guards that were there to cast lots for the person's belongings, whatever they were. So that was just something that they were doing. I could even see them, they weren't really giving Jesus a hard time.
Well, they didn't really have a dog in the fight.
Yeah, they did. They were like, here's another person we need to crucify. We've done this hundreds of times. I'd like to have a new duty. I'd like to be sent to Hawaii for a while, no crucifixion.
Yeah.
But the Jewish people were very complacent in their life because even with the Romans in the area, there was peace. Mm-hmm. And they were allowed to be Jewish people doing Jewish things every day, including Passover. And, I correlate it to us Christians. We pray, we think about the second coming of Jesus, but do we really want it to come? Do we really want it to come? Or do we want to live our lives, die, and then go to heaven and let Jesus come some other time? I've heard prayers where people say, come Jesus, come.
Mhm.
And that I always thought is that, do you really want him to come today? Do you want him to come in the next half hour? So we become complacent. I think that complacency is the worst part of humanity.
Mhm.
And we sit back and we watch others suffer because we don't suffer with them. And that's something that Jesus did on the cross, was he suffered for all of us. And he suffered for humanity. And I think he was, when he said, God, my God, why have you forsaken me? I think he just, God couldn't watch what was going on. So God knew that this great thing had to happen.
Mhm.
And so Jesus said, I need your strength more now than ever.
But don't we all have a streak of bad in us? Do you agree with that?
I do.
Yes, we do.
You can't, every human being has a streak of bad. The impulses that led the Germans to murder millions of Jews, the Soviets to murder millions of their own people, the Khmer Rouge to murder millions of Cambodians, the Hutu of Rwanda to take machetes to 800,000 of their fellow church members, co-workers, and neighbors who were Tutsi, exist in all of us. That's kind of alarming, isn't it? Yet we're surprised to hear that some of these people were Christians that were doing this. We are not nice people. But, okay, maybe we can't see ourselves getting involved in something like that. But what makes you really, really just explode in rage? Road rage comes to mind for me. There are certain things that really, really get your goat, right? What if you're in a restaurant or something, you don't get good service? Do you act up or do you?
Walk out.
But are we always, okay, let's turn the corner around. What if you're witnessing something like rage or bullying or something like that, and you don't participate in it, you just sit silently by?
I'm just a bystander.
You're just a bystander, but aren't you just as guilty?
Yes, you are.
Because you're not trying to
Not
stop
Because
it.
you're not trying to stop it.
But I think in a situation like that, especially if you're seeing adults fighting or bullying or
Yeah.
whatever, you have to be fearful that if you do intervene, you might become the victim.
Well, that's true, yeah, that's true. But this is what Jesus was feeling. This is what was going on around him as he hung up on the cross. So let's consider three things that Jesus' words or teachings tell us about him. Jesus knows what it's like to feel abandoned by God. Have you ever felt like God abandoned you? Now tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was just a fleeting moment. We've all had times in our lives when we feel like the whole world is against us. Lord, I can't take it anymore. To me, this statement by Jesus is his human side. He was experiencing this as a human being would experience. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he 3 times prayed to God that the cup be taken from him. I think that was his human side. He knew it was going to be awful.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's hanging on the cross, he feels like, I can't do it. I can't take anymore. To me, that shows, I think that's one reason that this statement was included in 2 of the Gospels. Because that is the ultimate feeling of a human being, and Jesus experienced it like we experience
The complete aloneness.
it. Yes. the complete aloneness. So he's crying out to God. This is the way we have also done that. So if he feels abandoned by God, we are too. This was a tremendous sacrifice for him. And sometimes I don't think it really hits home with us what a great sacrifice it was. And he is teaching us up there that we should sacrifice ourselves a little too. He gave the ultimate sacrifice for us, but what do we do for him? There's nothing any of us can do as human beings that would equal his sacrifice, is there? But how can we give of ourselves for him? Mahatma Gandhi made a statement, I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. Now, do we really want to be thought of that way? How can we give of ourselves? Oh, come on. You know, do it for others.
Yeah, making sacrifices.
You know, it's a sacrifice sometimes to get up and drag ourselves to church on Sunday mornings, isn't it? Or to give up a Saturday morning to go to the food bank. Or how can we sacrifice ourselves, give of ourselves?
If we would just, we don't have to do any of that stuff at all. If we would just treat each other with love.
The golden rule. Yes.
Jesus, I don't remember the exact scripture or where it's at, but Jesus, I always thought about this. He was giving us a premonition of his being on the cross. He was talking about dying for anyone, much less a good person. And I always think about that, that saying that Jesus said, that sort of, would you give your life for someone you don't know, whether they be good or bad? And, most of us have to answer truly, is it?
No. That's right.
But I always thought about it at the same time. Years ago, I was driving down I-85, which is one thing I'm not going to miss in my retirement. But I was driving along like I normally do in the right-hand lane, doing the speed limit, just calm and collected. And this kid in a delivery van
Flew past you?
I tell this one.
flew past me, and he didn't realize that the traffic had stopped. So he slams on the brakes, whips the car into the right-hand lane. Of course, I see it coming, so I'm already stopped, pretty much. His van hits the side of the tractor trailer and goes down the embankment. That's about 45, 50. I mean, it's just through briars and everything else. I parked the car, jumped out of the car, ran down the embankment, and I got to the vehicle. My pants were just shredded just about from the briars. Didn't feel a thing. So I get down there, and the kid's in the back of the van. He didn't have a seatbelt on. He was in the back of the van. Sling open the door, and I said, "Are you okay? Can you get out of the van now?" And he says, "I think so." So we get out of the van and come out. I get him away. This was a toner printer repair guy, and there were rollers everywhere. So I get I get him out, and we get off to the side, and he's shaking up, and the fire truck shows up about 30 minutes later, just normal. He gets out and says, "Boy, you guys are lucky." I said, "The gas is leaking all over the place." And he said, "This thing could have blown up at any time." And I thought about that, and I said, you know, I didn't think twice about it. But would you do the same thing in any circumstance like that?
Yeah. When we think of serving God, sometimes we think about the missionaries like Gary and Lily Stone. They've given a tremendous amount of their life and time and everything else over the years. But all of us can't do that. But anything we do to help others is serving God. Taking a meal to a family, or when there's sickness or death, or visiting people in nursing homes and hospitals and homes, and there's a lot we can do to carry on, to live, to show that we are followers of Christ. Well, let's talk about this statement again. Jesus' final words, the only ones that were recorded, my God, why have you forsaken me?" are actually part of Psalm 22, which, if I'm not mistaken, is that what they call a lamenting psalm, where the beginning of it is like, oh my gosh, Lord, you're not helping me. Where are you? But then it ends with, I know you're going to be there for me. So this is one of the lamenting psalms, and it was very well known by the Jews. If they heard the first words, like he said, they knew what else was coming. It'd be like, and today, like if somebody started singing Amazing Grace and only sang the first line, we know what the rest of it was. But in this psalm, the first two verses says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but find no rest." So he's really down there. I would read this whole psalm, but it's pretty long. Verse 7, all who see me mock at me. Verse 16, a company of evildoers encircles me. Verse 18, for my clothing they cast lots. Beginning to see Verse 16 also says, they have pierced my hands and feet. But the psalm doesn't end there. In verse 24, this is a note of confidence that God had not abandoned the psalmist. For he did not despise or abhor the affliction of the afflicted. He did not hide his face from me, but heard when I cried to him. And it ends with, before him shall bow all who go down to the dust, and I shall live for him. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord and proclaim his deliverance to a people yet unborn. So when we hear Christ saying on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's actually saying a prayer, quoting scriptures that are comforting to him. I've always, for many years, Psalm 46, the first verse, 5.
God of Jacob is with us.
I've said this 100 times and say I have that mental block here. Y'all have upset me.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed with all you people here.
Don't feel bad. I walked into the kitchen this morning and couldn't remember why I was in here.
Okay. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. That's my comforting Bible verse. Do y'all have some? Do you think that when you really feel like You just can't get through it. Is there anything you think of? And
I lift my eyes into the hills.
I like Luke 23. The two that are walking from to Emmaus, and they're walking along, and then Jesus joins them, and I'm saying, you know, wouldn't that be just wonderful to know that Jesus walks beside you wherever you go? It's not a song, but it's
well, it doesn't have to be a song. Any verse of scripture that gives you comfort, gets you through rough times is good. But this is what Jesus was doing. See, we see that one little statement that says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And yes, it makes us think that, well, he realizes what we're going through. We feel forsaken by him at times. But then if we read down, if we go further, we realize that he is praying. And you know, we get angry with God when we're going through rough times, don't we? We fuss at him, we yell at him, but it's okay. God wants us to understand. And as John Holland told me one time, when I said, is it okay to be mad at God? And he said, yes, it's mad. You can be mad at God. It shows you have a relationship with him. He's your friend. We get mad at each other, don't we, sometimes? Well, excuse me. John Holland told me, he said, you get mad at God, don't you, sometimes? But that doesn't mean you don't love him. But that's what Jesus was doing. He's saying, you know, I just can't take it. But then he knew that it was going to work out okay in the end. It may not be the way we want it to work out, but it works out, right? The three things that we're meant to remember when we hear Jesus praying this from the cross. Number one, we're meant to find ourselves in the crowd among the religious people that were taunting. And we were there. We're still there. We're meant to see the shadow that lurks in us that makes us do evil things. Bad things. Not nice things. Okay, maybe we're not evil, but we're that streak's there that can be fed. Second, we're meant to see the costliness of God's grace. It wasn't just, oh, here, you have grace. It took suffering and dying, humiliation to give us grace. It was a big price. So others should be moved by our sacrifices. And like I say, you know, we can't even imagine sacrificing to that extent. We got it pretty good around here, you know? But a lot of people don't. Finally, we remember that, you know, this is where it's hard to wrap your head around the Trinity. Because, you know, God in three persons. God was up there. Holy Spirit was up there. His Son was a physical human being who went through every single thing that we as human beings experience, including feeling that God had abandoned him. So he knows everything that we go through. He knows joy, he knows sorrow, he knows physical pain, he knows mental anguish. He knows losses of friendship, losses of family members. He knows that he's experienced every single thing we have, including the worst thing ever, that feeling that God has forsaken us. So we know that this cry of dereliction, as it's called, the story doesn't end there. even though Lent ends in a couple of weeks. We find an empty tomb. And that's where our faith comes in. Any questions?
Good lesson.
Y'all been good today. Y'all been chatty today. Let's pray. Forgive us, Lord, for the times we, like those who stood at your cross, have acted with cruelty. Thank you for identifying by your suffering with all who have ever felt forsaken or cry out, why? Help us to trust in you in our own times of adversity. Amen.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh.